I'm gonna turn my camera off and move over to our esteemed colleagues from Chicago Public Schools, Helena Swanson-Nystrom and Lily McDough, and also Tim Beekman, who's the president and co-founder of Safari Montage. And maybe you guys can address those initial questions first, and then I need to pass, I think, Helena, I'm passing you the screen sharing rights. Okay.
Tim, do you have any insight into that question?
Yeah, I do. I mean, if you look at what's happening in Georgia, matter of fact, today, and what's happening in South Carolina, is the sharing of instructional playlists and lessons and instructional delivery is really taking off. Matter of fact, South Carolina is designing the whole state to share content, whether it's created content or facilitated purchase content at the state level, distribute it and manage it to the school districts, as well as having schools and even teachers, if they want to, bring content up, vet it, and put it across the district. So I think that comment is exactly what we're seeing in the market. We're, and that content is managed, vetted, and facilitated. So to answer that question, yeah, that's what I see. Okay, so to get started here, my name's Tim Beekman. I'm Safari Montage. I'm not doing much on this presentation. Helena's doing it all, and I'll let her introduce herself. But our strategy here was that Chicago's building an ecosystem from the ground up. And this is very exciting. I worked on a lot of projects in my life, but this is one of the most exciting ones. So Helena, you're up.
Hi, everyone. My name is Helena Swanson-Nystrom. I'm the Director of Academic Operations for the Curriculum Equity Initiative, which is Chicago Public Schools' initiative to build a comprehensive digital curriculum, pre-K through 12th grade, across content areas. And the name of the curriculum, when it's released next summer, will be Skyline. So you'll hear reference to the Curriculum Equity Initiative and also reference to just Skyline as a brand. So I want to talk a little bit about the status quo in the district. Currently at CPS, schools are responsible for developing or procuring their own curricular resources. In some cases, individual networks across the city have purchased curriculum for their schools, though not comprehensively, so in one grade band or one content area. In some cases, the district has made recommendations for curricular purchases, but again, not comprehensively. Additionally, the district has not historically tracked the curriculum that is being used across Chicago, and in many cases, as you can imagine, the responsibility for designing curriculum and curating content falls onto the individual teacher. So we actually did a survey of over 500 CPS teachers at the beginning of this project. We asked, does your school currently have curriculum in the area that you teach? And as you can see here, 46.2%, so almost 50% of respondents said, no, we do not have curriculum in the area that we teach. So what are the implications of this? You can probably imagine the variability of quality disproportionately affects our most vulnerable students who are regularly exposed to below grade level content. It's really difficult to support curriculum implementation at scale. Professional learning from the district level can't be aligned to any content if there's not sort of universal content across the city. And it's hard to set a benchmark for learning. From a technical standpoint, students are using a variety of systems. If they're using a variety of different materials, there's a data security risks that are associated with using different systems. And then technical issues are really difficult to support. So in 2017, the district decided that adopting a universal curriculum was a major priority, and we started having conversations with districts and states across the country to figure out what they had done. From these conversations, we realized that there's neither a curriculum nor a single curriculum delivery system that actually meets our needs and sort of aligns to our vision of equity for our students. So in 2018, we started to build out a process to develop both a curriculum and a delivery system, and Tim and I are going to give you a brief overview of each of those today. So first, with curriculum development, the discovery process that I mentioned that started in 2017 showed that there are two traditional models for obtaining curriculum across the country. The first is that there are districts out there who just purchase curriculum off the shelf. The nice thing about this is if the issue is that 46.2% of your teachers don't have curriculum, you purchase it and they have it. The bad thing about that is it's, off-the-shelf curriculum is one size fits all, so it's really not built for Chicago students and the diversity that we have across the city, the different types of learners that we have. The second model that we identified is there are districts out there who are building from scratch. The really nice thing about this, if done well, is it is targeted explicitly for your student body. The bad thing is that we were finding it was taking districts upwards of 5 to 10 years to build in just 1 or 2 content areas, which just felt too long. So instead, what we did was we developed a hybrid model designed to obtain the benefits of both of these models while diminishing the limitations. And the hybrid model is that we actually partnered, we put out RFPs and entered into contracts to partner with national publishers to purchase base licensed content, and then entered into agreements with them to work over 2 years to modify a portion of that content, so 25 to 50% depending on the contract. Those modifications and customizations are based on feedback from district level teams, so the math team, the science team, et cetera, as well as cross-content teams, so the teams that represent our English learners and diverse learners, social emotional learning at the district level, and also based on feedback from teacher reviewers. The other thing that the partners are doing over 2 years is they're actually taking their content from their separate systems and moving it onto a single CPS technical ecosystem. So if we had purchased off the shelf, you might be pointing all CPS students, you know, your science is at Pearson, your ELA is at McGraw-Hill, go to these different systems. From a user experience standpoint and from the standpoint of being able to modify it going forward, we wanted it in a single place. So here is just a brief overview of the subject matter areas that we're building in. For ELA and math, we've partnered with Public Consulting Group. For science, we've partnered with Amplify Science. For social science, we're working with McGraw-Hill. And then for world languages, Spanish and French, we're working with Vista Higher Learning. These 6 content areas, they're being built now, and version 1 of the curriculum will be released in the summer of 2021. And then the last bullet, you can just see the additional content areas that we're in the early stages of building out. That'll sort of be a phase 2 of the Curriculum Equity Initiative. So I just want to give a couple examples of what CPS customizations look like when we talk about the hybrid model and say that 25 to 50% of the curriculum, the base curriculum, is being modified. Here are some of the things that we're doing. First, we're building in mini lessons to make the curriculum as flexible as possible for different learners. So there are mini lessons for students who need additional challenges. There are mini lessons for students who need an opportunity to review. And then there are English language mini lessons for students who need those supports. We're also building in supports for diverse learners and English learners. We're aligning all of the content to WIDA standards, which are the English language learning standards, and SEL standards, both in case format. We're building in new social emotional learning opportunities, and then a lot of Chicago-based learning examples. I want to briefly talk about the feedback, review, and revision process. So we wanted as much teacher voice in this as possible. So we brought in over 300 CPS teachers who are participating in what we're calling the Curriculum Collaborative. In the Curriculum Collaborative, they are using rubrics that CPS developed in partnership with EdReports to provide their feedback. That feedback then goes to the vendor partners for them to improve and finalize those drafts. And we've actually built into the contract 6 production cycles. So over in each production cycle, there are new draft units that are submitted, and the teachers then provide feedback. And the idea is that we're actually building in continuous improvement into the process. So cycle 1 units are pretty good, cycle 2 units are even better, cycle 3 units are even better, and so on and so forth. So I do want to show just a quick example of what this actually looks like. As we'll discuss later, the instructional content is housed in Safari Montage. And so if you pull up Safari Montage, this is just an example of a particular unit in ELA 9th grade. If you click here, you can select the content area, and then if you click here, you can select the grade level. So right here, if you click here, you can actually see just unit information. This is all teacher facing. But if you look at this link right here, we actually have the unit plan in a Google document, and we wanted all of these text-based documents, these large text-based documents, to be in Google so that the district can modify it in real time, or a teacher could make their own copy and make their own modifications if that feels necessary. As you keep going, here, again, you can expand and the teacher can see information about the lesson, but they can also click on the lesson plan, and then the same way as the unit plan, it's in a Google Doc and there's a lot of information there. As you keep going here, you'll see these links here. These are actually links to playlists, and a playlist is student-facing content. So here's an example of a playlist in ELA grade 9. This is the teacher view of the playlist. These are all the student-facing slates. And then here is an example of a student-facing playlist. So you can imagine a student, if they have an individual device sitting in a classroom and clicking through as the teacher is leading the lesson. You could also imagine, depending on the classroom, the teacher is actually projecting it on a screen for everyone to see. So I also want to quickly run through some of the elements of the Skyline curriculum that we're most excited about. Here are some texts from our English Language Arts courses. Our libraries team and Department of Literacy worked really closely with PCG to identify texts that serve both as windows and mirrors to the cultural identities of CPS students. One of the key points in contract negotiations with PCG was that we could actually disengage the anchor text that they had in their base curriculum and select new ones based on the needs of our students. Here in ELA is an example of a social emotional learning based activity. 7th graders are asked to break into groups and set up definitions of a strong and safe classroom community. This is an example of peer collaboration. So obviously digital does not mean sitting in front of a screen all day. And so there are a lot of peer-to-peer and hands-on activities that we're building into the curriculum. Less valuable right now, but hopefully will be very valuable soon. In math, this is an example from our math curriculum. We want to connect the math content to real world scenarios as much as possible. So here are just 2 examples. And in particular on the left, this is a Chicago example with the Bud Billiken Parade, which takes place on the city south side every year, and connecting formations in a parade to what students are learning in that math lesson. Here's an example from science. The Amplify curriculum that we're building on is actually already incredibly interactive. They really take advantage of the digital nature of their content. So each unit has digital simulations built in, and students are able to test their hypotheses and play around. And then in science, we're also working to make assessment content work for different learners based on the direction of our Office of Diverse Learners. And so here's an example of a model-based assessment. On the top here, you can see you can actually type in your answer, more traditional. At the bottom, you can draw in your answer, just to show similar learning, but show that you've learned it in different ways. In social science, we've worked really closely with McGraw-Hill to increase the cultural relevance of our curriculum. So this is a 10th grade unit, and students are asked on the left to sort of challenge normative narratives around the United States. They're asked to challenge why Andrew Jackson is on the $20 bill. They are learning about the importance of Juneteenth, and then they're learning about the important role that women activists played during Jim Crow. McGraw-Hill has also done a really good job of bringing Chicago examples into every unit. So on the left, this is an example from a kindergarten unit where students are learning about maps, and they point to Maggie Daley Park, which is a park in downtown Chicago. And then on the right, this is from an 8th grade unit. Students are learning about segregation, and in particular, segregation and the history of segregation in Chicago and Chicago neighborhoods. And they can actually toggle between this map here to see the different income levels and the different levels of segregation across time. And then lastly, in Spanish and French, our world languages team has worked closely with Vista to bring in as many authentic resources as possible so that learning a language is based on real life situations. So here are just some examples of that. And then they've also really prioritized identifying the correct proficiency levels so that the resources are as flexible as possible for all of our schools and all of our students, and we can serve the needs of our heritage speakers along with a student who might be taking a language for the first time in middle school or in high school. So the customized portions of the curriculum that are being driven by our vendor partners are really exciting. We're very excited about them, and they certainly are consistent with the district's CPS's definition of equity and culturally responsive education. But the digital nature of the curriculum will actually allow teachers to make their own customizations and further meet the individual needs of individual students, classrooms, or communities. So teachers will be able to copy lessons and make their own modifications. And if they want to, they'll actually be able to share those modified versions back to the district level. And as long as those modified versions meet our definition of high quality curriculum, we'll then share them district-wide. And the expectation and hope is that there actually will be an exponential growth in the volume of high quality resources that are available for all of our teachers over time. Additionally, we're actually partnering with a nationally recognized expert on culturally and historically responsive education to show teachers how to make these modifications. We don't just want to teach them technically how to do it, click right here, save here, share here in Safari, but we want to provide the support for how to do it well. And then lastly, in terms of teacher customization, co-teachers will actually be able to work together on Safari Montage to modify lessons to meet the needs of students. And we're hoping that in particular, this will really serve our English learners and diverse learners. So in addition to customizing our curriculum, we also wanted to customize our curriculum delivery system to meet the needs of our teachers and students. And I'm going to turn this over to Tim to talk about the CPS technical ecosystem.
Great, we can just go to this slide. So, you know, one of the things we had to do in this, one of the requirements of Chicago, since it was a design and build, which always sounds like custom, was to make sure this was non-custom. I think Liana had a comment about sharing content. Well, the vendors in here are all building their content in thin CCs, which is an IMS standard. And so, you know, later on, if they want to change and modify from a different district, they have some opportunity to do that. But in the ecosystem, it was designed on standards. So the SIS, Google Classroom, all of these systems had to coordinate together and had to facilitate one outcome and be manageable. I think as you know, if you build a digital curriculum and you have 80, 100,000 people on at one time, the idea of it managed and facilitating itself and running on its own is critical. In Chicago, that was part of the requirement, is even though this is designed on Chicago's needs, is that it was transparently plug and play in the configuration of what they can do. And if they don't like a vendor in 2 years or 1 year, they can change it. And so the ecosystem here is very, very strong. The other thing that was important in this ecosystem was security. As we all know, in the last 3 weeks, we've heard districts that have ransomware attacks and all that. The security here is very high level, OAuth 2 style security. And all the vendors had to cross their T's and dot their I's so that they could be in part of this ecosystem. We also did some unique things with CASE, which is a new academic standard, which a lot of states are adopting. So Chicago can build on those standards, add, even create resources tied to their own standards. Next slide. You know, the other thing that was important for Chicago is this just didn't come from the admin down, and that it came from teachers up. So they have a UX expert on staff, and they also continually get input from the staff, you know, good and bad. You know, if you read the comments here, I'm not going to read them. You know, they're loving what they're seeing already, which is if you work in a district, which I worked in a long time ago, that's a first of all hard thing to have happen, where you get buy-in across the district. And I think secondly, you know, they have suggestions on improvement. And because we're building this to standards, because it's an ecosystem that has flexibility, those changes are possible. Next slide. The educational technology. Now, someone mentioned earlier, I think Liani talked about all the schools, you know, building-based resources versus district-based resources. And I think Chicago's really getting a good handle on this. And that is, up to a few years ago, everybody kind of did their own thing. So you had no continuity, no strategy, no management, nothing, no training was hard, difficult. So they have an RFQ coming out that for a tech catalog where the vendors have to meet standards, they have to facilitate systems. And if you want to sell in Chicago, whether that be a model that you might want to do at a school, it has to integrate into the ecosystem. It has to meet certain standards. This is huge right now because it lowers the cost of maintenance, it lowers the cost of training, it lowers the cost of adoption because everybody works together. So those products can be utilized by school and network. So Chicago has individual networks. So a network might say, I really like this tool for my district or my schools. rocket, but it still has to interface into the plug and play model, which is very, very cool. Next. I'm going to not talk heavily about implementation. I'm going to pass this, but this is the type of implementation where you're working on it every week. Lily's in the background this call, and it's always at 6 in the morning and 11 at night project because of the amount of work. And I think it goes back to what some of you have talked about with change in personnel and change in responsibility. And sometimes you don't get rid of your own responsibility, you just get more. And so, as this is being implemented, there is a ton of commitment. It's very exciting for me. I work in a lot of districts to see the engagement of the CPS people and this being successful. So implementation, part of that is always the human factor. And we've got a great human factor here. You're on.
Thanks, Tim. I'm just going to, lastly and briefly, I want to walk through our thinking around implementation. So there are 4 projects within our implementation program: stakeholder engagement, communications and marketing, obviously, external evaluation. Is this product good, high quality? And then most importantly for this conversation, school readiness. And we've broken school readiness down into 2 buckets: first, infrastructure and operations, and then professional learning. So first, CPS will be releasing guidance around digital readiness that is essential for successful implementation, including operational readiness, access to devices, internet connectivity at the school level, and instructional practices such as classroom setup or technology integration. And then second, from a professional learning perspective, there are 4 key areas of learning that we'll be focusing on over the next year or two. First, how to access and use the systems in the ecosystem. Second, what culturally responsive curriculum actually means and how to make additional modifications to further improve it. Third, how to build professional learning that is centered around content. As I mentioned, without a universal curriculum, professional learning has been content agnostic, so how do we improve upon that? And then fourth, and most importantly, the content itself. And this will be tailored to a particular audience. So first, central office and the network teams, the people that are leading professional learning across the district. And then second, the teachers and the school leaders who will actually be using the curriculum. So before we close, and I know we only have a couple more minutes, I did want to say on a personal note how incredibly excited I am about this project. To echo Tim, I am a graduate of Chicago Public Schools. But much more recently, I graduated from Harvard Law School, where I spent a lot of time studying the intersection between education law and education policy in the United States. I was not planning to return to Chicago right after graduation, but I became involved in this project early on. And when I found out that there was a job opening, I really wanted to move home and be a part of this. From my perspective, there are sort of 2 main reasons why I think the Curriculum Equity Initiative will be successful. First, the team that I joined is incredibly creative and incredibly committed. And then second, the Curriculum Equity Initiative really is the vision of our Chief Education Officer, LaTanya McDade, and we've received support from her and other district leaders throughout this entire process. So on behalf of our team, I'm really, really grateful to be able to share our experience so far with you today, and we certainly welcome any feedback or questions that you have. And we have our contact information up here. Feel free to email us or reach out.
Okay, awesome. Any other last comments from Tim?
No, I think that, that this COVID has, as you guys have already brought up, has brought some things to the forefront. And it tends to push things a little harder than before, but no, I think you covered a lot of great things. Helena's on top of this, and I'm excited. I think this is the idea that this is customized, but yet standardized in a sense, and can change quickly with the needs, whether that's at home or in the school. I think is so critical right now, as you guys have talked about earlier. That would be my last piece.
Yeah, and it's deep work. This isn't surface level stuff. This isn't, where Helena, is it Helena? Helena.
Helena, but anything you want to say.
It's not just, most districts, as they enter in, they're just kind of going off, they're authorizing a bunch of stuff. But what you've delved into here is an architecture of how you're going to be able to have some prediction in what is being done at the teacher level. I think it's awesome. So I'm showing you a screen right now. I took back screen share. One of your schools is winning an award this year. I'm sure their tech list is not complete. We delved as deeply as we could into what their answers were in terms of what they were using, but I'm sure there's many more. But they had a really interesting sort of characterization of what they're doing with technology, which is inclusive of play-based learning experience, which is something we wanted to hold up to the light, because right now a lot of districts are losing elementary kids because you can't have an elementary kid on a Zoom meeting all day long. That's ridiculous. And they're doing it right. So we want you to know that means, you know, Chicago Public is a winner. It's one of your schools, but you're a winner. You're total winners. So thank you so much. Okay, so anything else you guys want to comment on to share with our audience on what's happening in Chicago?
No, I think it's great.
Okay, great. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for sharing with us today on this forward-looking vision in Chicago Public. It's really awesome, and what Safari is doing is really awesome. Also very deeply technically proficient in terms of both use of standards as well as UI UX. I think it's a brilliant bit of work. So thank you guys very much.